4, we'll convene the Mendocino Council of Governments to order, and can we have roll call?
Director John Haschek.
Here.
Director Mike Carter.
Here.
Director Greta Connie.
Here.
Director Jeff Hansen.
Here.
Director Bernie Norvell.
Here.
Director Josefina Duenas. And Tasha Ostran.
Here.
And Chair Dan Jurdy.
Here.
Perfect, thank you.
Okay, thank you. And then we're going to just look to staff under Assembly Bill 2449. Have we received a request for accommodation under that bill?
We have not received a request.
Okay, thanks. Then takes us to item 3, which is the SAFE meeting. We are going to convene the Service Authority and Freeway Emergencies Board.
My name is Alexis Pedrati, and now I'm on a little bit better. Okay, I'm Alexis Pedrati. I am attached to staff report, budget, CHP agreement, all of the above. I know it's been a while, and maybe for some, not at all. So the call box program, Mendocino County SAFE, is the Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies. And for some of you, you may have not heard this quite yet, or you might have heard it in Janet's budget or some of the introductions to the board, but you also operate as the SAFE board as well. So we don't come and bring stuff to you guys quite often, but our plan is to bring stuff to you more because we're kind of at a turning point. So I did include a staff report, which talks to you a little bit about our current system we have in the county. What we have for operational boxes, 141 call boxes throughout Mendocino County along our state routes, and 97 of those are still traditional cellular, with the remaining being satellite technology. So we have, and some of you remember, we kind of bumped up against a wall in the past 2 years. All of our call boxes throughout the county were 3G. We went through a transition with Verizon where 3G was terminated, and we had to start transferring our boxes over to a 4G radio. We worked with Case, which is our contractor. They developed a radio that would work with our boxes to be able to connect with Verizon's 4G service, as well as getting into CHP, which is our primary answering point. So we have only been able to upgrade 70% of our county cellular boxes. So we're still 31 remaining upgrades in the county. And yes, those boxes are bagged. I will get that out there right now. So that is a real bummer. They are bagged out there in the county. A lot of them, there's still some on Highway 1. There's still some on Highway 128. A good portion of them along the county routes have been upgraded. The satellite boxes in the county are not affected by this because it is not a 4G, it's not a cellular issue. But we are continuing to work with our contractor Case. And I did mention in here that while we've been able to work through some of our issues we had last year with the upgrades, now we're kind of hitting up against a wall financially with our service or our system. So, you know, right now we are kind of taking a step back and taking a chance to evaluate the system, because I actually heard Director Carter a second ago say, you know, everyone has cell phones and they're great as long as you're close to a call box if you break down, right? I mean, I actually heard him say that. So I know, I get it. So you guys are all probably sitting here saying, like, why are we still doing this? Why do we still have these call boxes out here? Well, I pulled up a usage report before I came over here today so that I could tell you guys what your call boxes are actually being used out there in the field. And one way for us to feel like the system is still being used and utilized by our motorists is a good point to say our average primary answering point. So our primary answering point in the county is CHP. All of our call boxes, if you've ever stopped and used one, you pick it up and it immediately connects you to the CHP dispatcher. So all of our, we have test calls and we also have report calls that come in off of our boxes. So the number that I'm going to give you is primary answering point calls. So for our system from 7/1, so July 1st, 2022 to today, average primary answering point calls per day is 1.93. We are still over one call a day for this system. So if you ask me, is it worth it? Yes. I think obviously if you're close enough to that call box and you know where it's at, or you travel that route consistently and you know where to rely on these, or you're the mom with the carload of kids and now you have to walk, you're going to you're going to know where it's at. So I wanted to point that out because I did hear that and I was like, oh, that is always the point. So getting back to my staff report, financially, this system is, it's really hard right now to say that it can sustain itself. I will tell you why. When we brought it to the board quite a few years back, we looked at satellite service. Satellite service we thought was going to, start out really exciting and the price was really high, but we thought that eventually it would be technology and it would start to decrease. We have not seen that. The satellite boxes cost a lot. And so when you get to the budget, which is the next point, that's where you're going to see some of our really high expenditures is in the satellite service. So what we intend to do in the next year is, and we've already started working with CASE, is they have gone out to our sites, particularly a lot of the satellite sites, and as cellular becomes a little bit better in our county, they're able to transition a satellite box back to a cellular. That will save us a ton. So already they have identified 11 satellite boxes that we can convert back to cellular. They have also identified, unfortunately, a few boxes along Highway 20 that the trees have now blocked their sky view, so their batteries will no longer charge. So they will be up for what we'll put together an action plan, and they will be up for potentially removal because, we're not even going to go there with trying to, you cannot cut a redwood, you cannot trim anything like that. So their lifespan is done. So unfortunately, unfortunately, they are close enough to the city of Fort Bragg where I think the cellular service is still pretty good. 5 miles, one is 5.9, and its battery will not recharge because of its location. So certain things like that. So what we're bringing today is basically telling you where the system is at and how we hope to move forward. One being evaluating our entire system, putting together an action plan, whether it be, and I don't say financial or implementation plan because an action plan is a better way for us to move forward. It'll give us the potential to evaluate the system, potentially remove, shift, or install. So then that way we can see our system as a whole, where the needs are, and where we potentially do not need them any longer. So moving on, as well as the 4G radio issues, we also continue to deal with batteries that live out their life. We have to deal with boxes being knocked down, storm damage. We've got boxes that have just started to deteriorate. So we've got ongoing maintenance for boxes. So those are just some of the items that we continue to deal with. That I think covers my staff report. I can move into the budget because I also have that noted in my staff report that I did include the budget as well for discussion. So, or I'm happy to answer some questions stopping here before we move forward. Okay.
Yep. Why don't you proceed? Yeah.
Okay. So also included in the packet was the Mendocino County Service Authority for Freeway Emergencies, the program budget. This gives you a couple years to be able to look at estimates versus actuals. And you can see in the green, this is our proposed 23-24 proposed budget against our actuals for 22-23. Our 22-23 budget obviously does not include all of our final expenditures for the year. So some expenditures like our planning contract for DBC, she bills on an annual basis. So she'll bill at the end of the year for that expenditure. New system installs and upgrades, because financially, the system hasn't been able to install some new radios quite yet. We have not included any new upgrades for the year. We did have some existing system maintenance, which is very minimal. And I will mention as well that as Case has been working on any of our boxes in the past with any of the new 4G radios, they have been really wonderful to bill all of that under the warranty of our radios, so they have not charged us for any of the time. We've ran into some issues with those radios quite a bit in the beginning, at the tail end of last fiscal year, moving into this year, and they have billed it all under warranty. So we have not seen any of those expenditures, which is really wonderful. Also, moving down the line a little bit, we have the cellular and satellite technology. That's where I mentioned this has, it's a pretty hefty expenditure for satellites. Our satellite bill runs around $3,000 a month, and Verizon is about $200. Moving on to the CHP contract for the primary answering point, that is also very minimal, and they do such a wonderful job, and we extremely appreciate their help with that. So those are our actuals for 22-23, and moving on to the proposed budget. Under the revenue, we have the Department of Motor Vehicle. This is our $1 annual fee from the registered vehicle. So every time someone registers their vehicle, $1 comes back to our SAFE program. We have also we gain a little bit of interest in this account. And then what we've proposed for the year for the expenditures. This includes the administration contract, the planning contract, and we do have here $10,000 set aside for system installs and upgrades. This is where we're hoping with those 11 satellite boxes that I had just previously mentioned being able to switch to cellular, that we can get those radio upgrades purchased and get them out there and deployed, which will bring our satellite service bill down. So we're kind of shifting and moving forward. We also have $5,000 identified for existing system maintenance and the cellular and satellite. I did bring it to $35,000, hoping that, as we said, those 11 boxes, that's going to save us about $550 a month. So we'll be able to see, and as we continue to evaluate the system, whether we decrease more satellites or shift service or have to remove them, we'll be able to see a little bit more of a decrease in that. And then 720 is identified for our CHP contract, which was also included in this packet, so you'll be able to see that as well. Bringing our total expenditures for our proposed budget at $116,668. And I will open it up for Nafili to give any other updates or anything that I missed or answer any questions.
Sure. I think you covered everything really well, both in the staff report for the system's status and then the budget as well. I just want to make sure that board members were aware there was a revised version of the SAFE budget that was added to the website that was different than the one that was included in the full packet that was on the website. So it has the line item for the upgrades to the current system. So when we're considering action today, that's the one that we'll be looking at. So I can share. I'm happy to share. I have it pulled up in case anyone needs me to share screen. But if you all have that, then I don't need to. Nope. All right. So I don't have anything else to add. It's great news that we're going to be able to transition some of those satellite boxes to regular cellular. As hopefully cellular service improves around the county, there will be more opportunities to do that. It'll really help the sustainability of our system, which although they're pulling these systems out in urban areas, as we can see by the usage report, they are still valuable here, particularly on certain corridors, 1 and 162 especially. So we hope to be able to maintain them as much as we can.
Go ahead, Director Hashak.
Yeah, so with the usage, And I do believe that, there is a real need for these, but do we know what kind of calls they are? Like, are they emergency calls? Are they like flat tires on the roads that ran out of gas, or those kind of calls? What do we know about them?
I can tell you the calls that come into CHP, they are not broken down in that detail, and I think that would be a lot of us to ask of CHP to notate each and every one of them. I do know that they can call for, whatever they feel, and CHP will remind them, you're calling California Highway Patrol, is this an emergency? And if someone is out there testing a box, they'll say, I'm from Mendocino Safe, I'm testing the call box. But most of the time they will remind you, like, you are calling California Highway Patrol, please identify your emergency. I will tell you that in Lake County, we did have an incident where someone would walk from Lucerne and they would try to order a pizza every day. But CHP did finally drive out there and remind him that this was an emergency call box and please do not do that. So I'm sure that they do get random phone calls, but just for informational purposes, our first call box on the list for the usage report for calling in to CHP had 75 calls, and it's located on Highway 162 at mile marker 14.4. So while there may be a few calls that were, I ran out of gas, I have a flat tire, there could also be those 2 or 3 that were severe emergency calls, and we were able to help them get the necessary emergency personnel that they needed. So, and there could be, 10% of those calls that took a second try, so we're not, the numbers don't get down to the actual definition of what they needed, but I think with the usage report, it shows that they're still being used. It would be interesting if CHP wanted to break it down a little bit further for us. I don't know that they would.
Yeah. I just think that if they were averaging 1.93 calls a day, that's around 700 per year, right? So obviously it's an emergency situation in some of these cases, and that's every cent is well spent, but it's a lot of money for that kind of usage.
Mm-hmm.
Right.
Yes, and that box in particular is a satellite box, because if 162, it's the canyon out there, and those were the ones that Phil Dow had gone out there previously. We worked really hard with Case, and we actually considered doing a landline to these boxes, but the landlines cost so much to get out to that canyon. So these were some of our first boxes out there in 162 in that canyon. And by the looks of it, that's where they were needed.
Ms. Pedrati, you had mentioned that there are potentially 2 call boxes between Fort Bragg and Willits that are coming out. I think you said one was 5.9 miles east of Fort Bragg. Do you know the location of the other one?
I think it's right after that. I believe it's at 11 point something, and I can get you those details as soon as I get back. I have them in an email from Case. Yeah, they were both identified.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, yeah.
Just to follow up with that, do you know if there's cell coverage in between the 2 locations? Because sometimes there's cell coverage and then there's gaps where there's no cell coverage.
I do not know. I do not know what the cellular service is out there. I just know there's a couple that he has identified, whether it's a bad location or it is the overgrowth has now, we can't even get battery to charge out there. I don't believe that neither one of those are, I believe, satellites, so they are cellular. I think our satellites start more around the 20-mile marker. So
Yeah, what I was saying is that there have been sections of Highway 20 where there is no cell coverage, as you point out, because of the canopy or the terrain. But then there are sections where your phone will work, and it'd be interesting to know if within that range that there are areas your cell phone would work. It's my purely anecdotal, not scientific observation that it seems like there are more sections of Highway 20 where the cell phone works today than maybe 15 years ago, but I don't know for sure.
I would absolutely agree with that. I think that the cellular, I know when we had gone back a few years prior to the 4G upgrade, we had worked with Verizon about where they were putting new cellular towers and where we could get service, especially when we were considering satellite locations. We didn't want to start installing satellite locations when Verizon had, potentially planned to put in a tower right there. That would cost a lot of money for us to eventually get cellular service. So I do believe that there is more cellular service coming about. But then again, I guess the question is what percentage of the county has cellular devices? I know that is a question that swirls in our office consistently. Is there residents, is there motorists still that drive out there without a cellular phone? That could also be a consideration that maybe they don't, I can't answer that because I do not know, but.
Right, and in the case of these particular boxes, it's not an issue of the cellular service to the boxes, it's the canopy blocking the solar, solar panel, so they're unable to charge.
And if he did find a location that was a better location, that he could shift it a mile, a half mile where it would charge and we would be able to get our service or our system still, then he will. Because there are relocations and then there are removals, so.
Go ahead.
First of all, I am thankful that we still have the boxes. Many people, like seniors, forget most of the times to recharge the cellular or forget to pay our cellular services. And so I do feel that we still are in need of the boxes. So thank you so much for spending the money and the time and all the effort you do for that. We also have to remind ourselves that most of our highways are being just having people who are homeless or who are camping or who don't have money. And so I think this is very humanly to keep just paying for that. And so I really appreciate all the things that you are doing. That's all I wanted to say for that. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
No, and we did not receive any public comment prior to the meeting.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to adopt the budget and the resolution for the contract with CHP?
So moved.
I will second.
Okay.
Can we do it that way?
I think they're both 3B and 3C. I think we can adopt them as one action.
I think you can do it as one action as long as we have the roll call.
John Hashek,
Yes.
Mike Carter,
Yes.
Greta Connie,
Yes.
Jeff Hansen,
Yes.
Bernie Norvell,
Yes.
Josefina Duenas, and Chair Danjurdi.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Well, we're going to recess as the SAFE and reconvene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Immediately recess as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency and reconvene as the Policy Advisory Committee. Next on our agenda is the consent calendar, the minutes of May 1st, and the approval of the May 12th Transit Productivity Committee minutes. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the consent calendar?
So moved.
I will second.
Okay. Do we have any comment on the consent calendar? Okay, doesn't look like we have any. Can we have roll call?
John Hashek,
Yes.
Mike Carter,
Yes.
Greta Connie, Jeff Hansen,
Yes.
Bernie Norvell,
Yes.
Josefina Duenas, Tasha Osran,
Yes.
and Chair Danjurdi.
Yes. All right, that takes us to public expression on non-agenda items. Members of the public wish to address the board can do so at this time. And we also have remote location Pointerina. Are there any members of the public who wish to comment to the board on items not on today's agenda? Okay. Interpret that as no. Then we'll go to the regular calendar presentation of the Clean California Grant from Caltrans.
Julia is going to be providing this presentation, but she had a meeting until 2, so she should be hopping on any minute.
Okay. Maybe we could go to the Technical Advisory Committee recommendations right now.
Okay. Hi, I'm back. I am here for the Technical Advisory Committee recommendation of May 24th for the final 23-24 Planning Overall Work Program. Most of you heard my update on the draft at the last meeting. So I am back today to present the 23-24 final overall work program before you guys. Nothing has changed since I presented the draft. It went before the Technical Advisory Committee at their May 24th meeting. We have a total of $894,365, and I apologize, I'm going to back up. I think I may have misspoke in saying that there was nothing that had changed since the draft. I do believe that I incorporated some very minor changes that were requested from Caltrans, as well as included a few carryover projects. Previously, the carryover may have included a to be determined. At this point in the final, we include an estimated amount that we expect to carry over, and then as the first amendment comes before you in August or September, we'll have all the final numbers. So in the final, we have carried over work element 3, which is the MTA feasibility study for the Ukiah Transit Center. We identified $50,000 of carryover for that project. Work element 5, for the mobility solutions feasibility study for rural areas, we also identified $25,001. We included the City of Fort Bragg Central Business District parking evaluation, and we put aside $50,000 for that. Oh, and I apologize, work element 12 for Ukiah, the City of Ukiah, the truck route study. We also included some carryover for $45,000. And I believe that is all that has carryover funding at this point. We will bring in training, the MCOG training. I also identified $20,000 of carryover. So those are the few work elements that have changed since the draft was presented to you guys. And it now totals $894,365 with 15 work elements in the final work program. I am happy to answer any questions, but these projects, just so you know, these projects have been included in the work program, all of their tasks along the way. So when you reviewed the draft document, they were all included in there. They just did not have a dollar amount. I have now assigned an estimated amount that we expect to carry into the next year. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Okay, I'm not seeing any questions from the board. Do we have any questions from members of the public? It doesn't look
Not
like we do.
seeing any.
Okay. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the overall work program?
I will move that we adopt the fiscal year 2023-24 final overall work program.
Second, Haschek.
Okay, can we roll call?
John Haschek,
Yes.
Mike Carter,
Yes.
Greta Connie, Jeff Hansen,
Yes.
Bernie Norvell,
Yes.
Josefina Duenas,
Yes.
and Tasha Alstrand,
Yes.
and Chair Dan Jurdy.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right. Tasha, is Julia here for the meeting?
There is one caller that doesn't have a name. I don't know if that's you, Julia.
I don't think so. I think that's a staff member.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't see her otherwise. I will check in
Okay, well, that's okay. We'll go to item number 11, which is the fiscal year 23-24 COG budget.
That'll be my item, Janet Orth speaking. So you have my written report, and we now have a budget package that looks like this that I prepared. And we make a few print copies once this is finalized, and we'll be happy to print up any for those who request it. Otherwise, you've got the PDF document that will be available online. So,
just stay with
yes.
the
Did I hear a question? No. Okay. All right, so I'd like to just briefly go over the changes since the May workshop when we went into this into some detail. So since the presentation in May, we've had more committee recommendations. There were 4 committees that recommend on the budget. And since you last met, the Transit Productivity Committee and the Social Services Transportation Advisory Council, the SSTAC, met. They met in May. And so we have their recommendations as well. And these are built into the narrative of the allocating resolutions that you'll be, we'll ask you to approve today. So total revenues are $16,175,346. And total proposed allocations are $15,753,101. And just the final changes, under the planning program, as you just heard Lexi describe, there were some additional funds carried over, added to the work program. So that amount for that program is now $894,000 and change. And I don't know if anyone caught this, but on Friday, Jody and I did an in-depth proofreading of this whole document here and all the figures in the document. I caught a couple of those last-minute planning program changes that were added that I had in a spreadsheet but didn't get added to your PDF document. It's up there now, so everything, all the numbers should be correct at this point on the website version. So. What else happened? The unmet transit needs were recommended. So the Transit Productivity Committee and the Social Services Advisory Council made their recommendations. They both made the same recommendation that there are unmet transit needs that are reasonable to meet. And you can find that in the exhibit to, in the resolution to the unmet transit needs resolution. And there's a divider page that says unmet transit needs, and then a 2-page resolution with several exhibits. And the needs that are recommended as reasonable to meet are the top 2 that were deemed the highest priority. And by that, everyone agreed. We don't necessarily mean they're more important, but they're more feasible and ready. So those 2 are affordable public transit link to Humboldt County, stopping in Piercy, Leggett, and Laytonville. And this would be at no cost to Mendocino Transit Authority. This would be from a grant that Humboldt Transit Authority expects to have. And they would start this service promptly. I'd have to look at our minutes to remember, but in 2024, I think, is when it would be. So that is contingent on the grant award. We expect that to happen. And some bus stops would need to be established along the route. And we also noticed that not only would that provide service going north, but it would actually provide some service from Laytonville down to Ukiah. So that's all good. The second one was fixed route timing that coincides with retail workforce shifts in the Fort Bragg, Mendocino coast area. That came from public testimony that we had here at our public hearing in February. There was a letter that was received from a business owner talking about how there was not a bus service that left town late enough. You know, the retail workers have to close up shop, and I think the last bus might have been around 5 o'clock. It wasn't late enough. So MTA thinks that this will at least improve that situation because what they are doing is adding an additional round trip of Route 65, the one that goes all the way to Sonoma County, and that has a lot of stops along the way. But that would add 2 more trips, and it would leave Mendocino, the town, in the evening. So that's going to add, let's see, if, from memory, I'm going to say 6 days a week, another round trip all that way. And so that includes Saturday service, and that also gives us, Willis to Ukiah, some of those other runs that people want. So those are the top 2 needs that are recommended as reasonable to meet. And that's part of the budget package. And that is a recommendation came out of the Transit Committee meeting to fund at least that coastal portion at $50,000. So MTA was asked to revise their claim to shift some of their operations funds into that line item for unmet transit needs. And so we have that. Also, I have collected all the necessary data to make the findings required by the Transportation Development Act to fund Mendocino Transit Authority's claim. And so those are findings that are detailed in the resolution under the tab Mendocino Transit Authority. So you see there's a 4-page resolution that makes all those findings that are required. And so I've completed a checklist. We have all those items. There will also be a few more items. We need MTA's budget and things like that. That we will get, we will have all the documentation that's required with their funding claim before the first payment of the fiscal year. So we expect to have all of that. What else should I tell you about public transit? I did want to note, and I put that here in my report, that when, because we've been concerned about, loss of funding and then trending downward and all of that with the revenues. But when we look at last year's allocations of several funding sources that go to transit, there's the local transportation fund, the sales tax. There's the state transit assistance, and that's from fuel taxes, gas and diesel. There's the capital reserve that MTA holds for MTA, and based on a 5-year plan. And there's state of good repair, which are grants, the formula that come from the state. So you put all those together, the difference with last year's actuals and this based on estimates is only down by 0.25%. So that's only about $18,000 out of $6.5 million. So we think we're doing quite well with that. And moving along to the next resolution, Surface Transportation Block Grant Program. There is one figure in the resolution narrative that really does not show up anyplace else. And that is because in this one Surface Transportation Fund account, our cash account, we manage 3 different programs there. So we track through the partnership program, comes right off the top at $100,000 a year. And I'll direct you to this resolution. The second page has a little chart of the proposed allocations. There was a question last month in the workshop about where does this $800,000 a year go? So we have $811,848 is the new revenue estimate. So partnership funding comes right off the top at $100,000. That's MCOG's own policy. And the next item is $90,000 toward local assistance, and that's a staff position here at MCOG. And the rest, which is about 3/4 of it, goes out by formula to the member agencies, the cities and county. It's all. You can see how much each of the cities and the county will receive from this allocation. But I did want to direct you to the first paragraph at the top of page 2. There does give a fund balance for what's in the partnership program, and our best estimates are that there is only one open project at this point, and that's the Covelo Trail. We've been providing matching funds for the state grants, and it's about $57,000 that's been allocated that remains. And we have an estimated $581,000 available in the partnership program. So that just doesn't, the way the budget is laid out, there isn't really anywhere else that tells you that. So we've now disclosed those figures. And the final thing I was going to mention was the last resolution, Regional Early Action Planning Program. That's for housing planning. That's a grant that we get. And Point Arena has completed their share of that. And there were 4 projects carried over from the other cities in the county. And administration has expended a portion of their 10% to date. So that's all I have, and I'm happy to take questions. Basically, to wrap that up, the council as a whole has taken no action on the budget during this process. The budget before you now is a result of deliberations by committees and staff. And at this meeting, action is required to adopt the budget by way of allocating resolutions for the coming fiscal year. So staff concurs with the 4 committee recommendations to date to approve the fiscal year 2023-24 Regional Transportation Planning Agency and Council of Governments budget by adopting the 5 resolutions for execution by the chair. And if desired, this action can be made in a single motion. So that concludes my report, and I'll take any questions.
Okay. Any board questions or comments? Go ahead.
Thank you, Director Connie. Oh, great. Maybe I've been so thorough we don't have any questions.
You need a motion to approve the 5 resolutions, and we can do that together?
I think you can, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll make that motion.
I will second.
Okay. Jeff, just looking at Point Arena, do you have any comments or questions?
No, not right now, thank you.
Okay. And do we have any public questions or comments? Okay. All right. Can we have roll call?
Director John Haschek,
Yes.
Director Mike Carter,
Yes.
Director Greta Connie,
Yes.
Director Jeff Hansen,
Yes,
Director Bernie Norvell,
Yes.
Director Josephina Duenas,
Yes.
Tasha Alstrand,
Yes.
and Chair Dan Jurdy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Tasha, do you know if Julia's in the meeting?
Yes, she is here.
Julie, would you like to make a presentation on Clean California?
I would love to make a presentation. So are you ready now?
Go right ahead.
Okay, let me share my presentation. I won't be too long. As soon as I find the share button, the big green one. But I do have some good news and interesting things. So that is probably not the screen I wanted to share, is it? No, oh yeah, there we go. It is. So I might start off with the good news of why am I late? I had just finished up a really interesting meeting with the headquarters. I've been trying for more than a year to get a vehicle abatement pilot started here in District 1. And it's something that every county that we have pretty much told me that they wanted was vehicle abatement. And this time I had headquarters and a couple of lawyers. So can I assume that Mendocino is still interested in vehicle abatement?
That was a yes.
Yes, okay, I can't see. I'm not good at controlling Zoom. I admit that oh there, I got to move that thing. So just to review back the presentation I was planning to give is that Clean California is a transformative initiative to remove litter, create jobs, and beautify California. I'd like to go back to that frequently because that is the heart of what we're doing. And you'll probably recall, if you were here since the beginning of Clean California, about a third of the money goes to cleaning up litter, and that includes dump days. A third of the money goes to Caltrans to clean up litter. So we have enhanced litter pickup and, other ways for Caltrans to clean up litter, and then including dump days. And then we have beautification projects. I'm sorry, I think I did section 1 twice. So sorry, too many meetings. The first third is litter. That includes dump days and Caltrans maintenance. The second third is Caltrans beautification projects, which in Mendocino County was going to be Boonville, but is going to be Covelo. And then in the other third is the local grants. So roughly a third, and a third of 1.2 billion with a B. For Mendocino, kind of a recap, throughout all of District 1, we have served about 10% of the population of District 1 at a dump day. And while I would love to have served more people, I think that's a pretty good number that we convinced to load all their stuff into their car and go to the dump for one of our events. We have received over 12,000 tires. And that says something about the tire situation in District 1, that there are definitely a lot of tires sitting in people's yards and garages. So we're number 1 in tires statewide for districts. We've had dump days in Covelo where we did dump week, 6 days of the transfer station being free. And I think I've reported to you guys on that, or do you want another recap?
Well, we've heard it. I don't know if there's 1 or 2 facts that you think are most important.
Just the basic need of people lining up at 2:30 in the morning or going to a free dump day. I think that's it. Casper Fort Bragg was very successful. Unfortunately, there were so many people in Casper Fort Bragg wanted to use the dump day. We had to close down early because we snarled traffic out on the highway. Gualala was also very successful. And we did a second tire day in Ukiah. The Mendocino beautification project in downtown Covelo. It is a good example of Clean California responding to community needs. We came in saying we want to do art, sculptures, and picnic tables. And what they said is we want solar lighting and speed bumps. And so we have a district-wide pilot, or actually maybe a statewide pilot, to have speed bumps on a highway in urban areas. So we've ordered special rubberized and movable speed bumps. So we adhere them down if they don't work or they do have unintended consequences, such as pushing traffic off onto side streets. We can actually relocate the speed bumps and try to learn more about refining it. But the community was really clear. We held 3 public meetings and all they kept saying is, we appreciate art, we'll do that ourselves, give us speed bumps. So that's what we did. And then I think you guys are aware of the special person crew in Ukiah. We're partnering with Elijah House. And so we have a crew of dedicated 5 days a week people who are experiencing barriers to employment. They're often either formerly homeless or incarcerated, that type of thing. And we're giving them jobs cleaning up litter throughout Mendocino. So they operate out of Ukiah and they go 120 miles in every direction. And they're doing really well. Their litter pickup is actually above target. So they're doing a really good job picking up litter. And we hope that they're learning work skills and having that income gives them an opportunity. And they're also getting wraparound social services skills. For many of them, we'll be able to move on to other jobs. We're continuing to have litter stand downs where the maintenance department, on the 1st and 3rd Thursday of every month, you'll see our maintenance staff out cleaning up litter, trying to make sure that the highways are clean. We get scored quarterly. And previous to Clean California, our score for litter was 64. Our most recent score was 98. The quarter before that was 100. So we believe that we're getting all of the litter. Well, maybe not all. We're getting a lot of litter. If we're missing litter, I'll reiterate, please put in a customer service request. If you see litter that needs to be picked up, you just Google Caltrans customer service request. It'll take you to a form you fill out, drop a Google pin on the site, and we'll take care of it, whether it's a litter, someone has dumped something, or if it's a pothole. We also have the Adopt a Highway stipend, and Mendocino has our most creative stipend adopter. And I think I talked to you guys about this in the past. We write him a check every month for $3,500. He's cleaning a number of sites, and then what he does is have businesses sponsor it, so they get their name on the sign. He does the cleaning and keeps the stipend, and that's working for him and working for the small businesses to have their names out on the hood. And it's working for the people of California, because the Adopt a Highway stipend is a very cost-effective way to get litter off the roads. And that talks about the customer service. I do want to briefly remind you the deadline for the Clean California local grants did pass. And these were the first round of grants. So the Manchester Band of Pomo Indians was the Mendocino recipient of an award, and they have an executed contract and are working on implementing their grant. So we do have one in Mendocino from the first round. Cycle 2 closed last week. There was $100 million available. We weren't even expecting a cycle 2, so that was a surprise from the governor. We expect to know who was awarded late summer, early fall, and they'll implement pretty much right away and complete by end of 26. Statewide, Clean California received 231 applications, and District 1 had more than 10% of the statewide applications. So I do not have access to the list, and I can't share the list of Mendocino organizations, but I do know we've worked with a number of groups in Mendocino and provided a lot of technical support. So I expect that there certainly will be applications, and I hope that there are awards in Mendocino. We're just trying to help our local agencies bring as much grant resources as they can. So that's what I have for you guys as far as an update. Anybody have feedback, questions?
Okay, yeah, go ahead, Greta.
Thank you for the report, Julia. I'm wondering if you have any special plans, if Caltrans has any special plans for Highway 162 during the summer season. As it warms up, a lot of residents from the Willits area, Brook Trails, tend to go out to the river on 162, and not everyone knows to pack out their trash. Too often they bag it up and leave it by the roadside where it gets picked apart by crows and ravens. Just wondering if there are any plans for cleanup or pickup.
Not anything different. So what you're saying is that you have a section of 162 that you think needs special attention in the summertime?
Yes, essentially between Legal Bridge, Highway marker 8 to 15, Dos Rios. All the pullouts tend to have bagged plastic trash after every weekend during the summer. Until I'd say till mid-July, when then the river gets too funky.
Okay, so basically now to mid-July?
Yes.
It would be something you could always report as a customer service. In this case, I took a note and I'll let our maintenance staff know. We also may talk to Adopt a Highway adopters if they're in that area. But I will let our maintenance know that it may need every Monday, it may need to be we may need to cruise that area on Mondays.
Thank you so much.
Weeks here.
That'd be excellent.
Yeah, the problem with litter is that a little litter makes everyone feel, I hate to say more comfortable, but they get acclimated to it. So we really don't want litter to sit there. So it's hard to send an employee in a state vehicle out to pick up one McDonald's cup, but if there's a little more than that, we don't want it to stay there. So thank you for letting me know.
Director Hashak?
Yeah, thank you. Hey, Julia, thank you for all your work, especially up in Covelo, and listening to the people and, being flexible with their concerns, because that was very important. And certainly safety is the high priority up there. You know? But, you know, when you see all the work that's being done with the litter and the dump days, it's really, people can see what government can do, you know, to help things get better. I was just wondering, you had, on the chart, it said 3% was going to education. And what does that entail? What are the educational components that are happening?
So the vast majority of that 3% went to a contract to Sagent. They're our educational provider. They're doing marketing and various media campaigns. We do have a kids coloring book, that type of thing. The education component is being run out of the public information office at Caltrans. So, you know, the vendor is pretty much running a public education campaign. So I have a few pictures. It's, how do we politely say, not as well tied into the rest of Clean California as it might be if it were an ideal situation. But we do have a pretty good communication and a common theme. So
yeah, it's just
if
really,
there's something in particular that you need, or you have an educational opportunity,
no,
we
I
are
just think
starting
that it's really important to do that educational component, because we can't be in the business of picking up everyone's garbage all the time, right?
Yeah,
Better to prevent it.
Exactly. One of the things we're doing in Clean California was a 3-year program, or is a 3-year program. We are just about to enter year 3, which would logically be, you know, we do work, but we would also need to ramp down. There is a budget change request in to continue at least some components of Clean California for 4 additional years. So at this point, we're planning to ramp down unless they plan us to ramp up, I guess. But either way, I don't see Clean California being around for the rest of eternity to clean up after people. It just doesn't make sense that we have housekeeping department at Caltrans. So what we're trying to do is, with dump days and all of our community events, try to really educate people about litter and taking responsibility and pride. We are looking at doing booths at some of the state fairs. We have educational games for kids. If K-12 teachers are interested, we've got, again, games and things like that. So the educational vendors should be rolling a lot of that out, but we also have access to it. So we'll bring coloring books, educational coloring books and such to the dump day events, and are definitely open. If you have other events happening, we would love to have an invitation to have a booth and to do more education.
All right, thank you.
I do agree with you. We can't just do this for people. We have to teach them to do it for themselves. In the long run, that's the most efficient way, is for people to take care of their own litter responsibly. I wish that had already been happening. The other thing that we're talking about a little bit in terms of some of the different counties, and this may or may not apply to Mendocino, but to look at your solid waste division and figure out whether what's being done currently is meeting the needs. And if it's not, is there another way to go? So Humboldt County, we have some of the supervisors there that are actually exploring having dump be free. Apparently in Humboldt it was free up until the 80s when they started to charge. And so there's some discussion. Now they have a budget deficit, so I think it's mostly discussion at this point, but about how can solid waste better collect the debris that people have, whether that's some of the free tire grant opportunities or other things. And we're happy to work with anyone that has interest in that type of thing. So we're providing data and information and context to the County of Humboldt. Anything else, or any interest in that, or other things that I can provide?
Yeah, Julia, I've got a comment. This is Nafili. So I just want to reiterate what Director Haschek said about your efforts on the Covelo project. I've been so impressed to see how quickly that's come together and how responsive Caltrans has been to meeting the needs of the community. And the flexibility has been, I think, so well received there. So we're really looking forward to seeing that project get implemented here soon. So thank you for that. And then also a question on the Caltrans projects. So we know we have the Covelo project. Have all of the Caltrans projects out of Clean California been selected at this point, or can we expect additional projects?
So we are looking at proposing a few additional projects. So there our bids have been coming in below our engineering estimates, and we have, as the projects have come in and are going out to construction, we're identifying very actively right now how much funding we have left from our contingency, and are planning to use every penny that we can rather than send it back to Sacramento. So we are in the process of vetting a number of projects. If there's an agency that has a pretty close to shovel ready beautification project that you're interested in, I would ask you to reach out to me, especially today or tomorrow, since I'll be on vacation starting Wednesday. But I'd be very interested in something that it won't be a big project. We could do something by cooperative agreement where we basically pay you to do this agreement. And you can see in the background of my background, that is the Samoa Bridge murals. We did that by cooperative agreement with the city of Eureka. So Clean California paid for these three, and there is a fourth one that's not in the picture, to be put on the piers of Caltrans Samoa Bridge. And the city leases the space underneath, and they use it for various things from boat launch to the festival you can see there. So if there's an agency that has a beautification project, I'd be happy to talk to you. We believe there will be some funding, but it will require headquarters approval.
And those projects, the Caltrans projects, they would need to be on state highway and not require additional right-of-way, correct?
Yes, they need to be ready to go. They need to be on the state highway, not require additional. They need to really be completed by December of this year. So murals are great, sculpture, art, landscaping that you can do now, especially drought tolerant or native landscaping. Things that can be done pretty quickly so that construction is completed by December 31st, but has a sense of beautification. Clean California does especially strive to serve underserved communities. So if you can do something there, that's so much the better. But it will need to be within existing state right-of-way.
Right, thank you.
So the bridges were a pretty innovative way to be on state right-of-way, because we've had a long-term air lease to the city for the waterfront area under the bridge. It's unusual in that they got to do the piers, so it's on state right-of-way, but it's within their airspace lease. So it worked out pretty well. We will be doing some additional retaining walls with the city of Eureka. Does anybody have any good ideas? And not that I want to take your whole meeting, but it's unusual for construction costs to come in lower, and we've had quite a bit of that.
Julia, just one briefly, here in Mendocino County, we were approached by Marin County and Sonoma County a couple years ago to do a 3-county partnership for Leave No Trace Behind. So I believe it's a national group that's doing the marketing in the 3 counties. And the idea was visitors are coming to any one of those 3 counties and maybe multiple. But they're requesting funds from the county general fund, and we just don't have any cash. We might have some limited staff time. So I don't know if that's something that would fall within Clean California. Again, it's a 3-county advertising marketing campaign to visitors to the 3 counties. So we could get you a copy of the budget, what they're requesting from each of the 3 counties, being Marin, Sonoma, and Mendocino. We're the only one in District 1 of the 3 counties.
You could send it. I don't know how they'll look at paying for something that's kind of an ongoing campaign. Typically they haven't, but they certainly won't if I don't ask about it. So you might as well send it to me and I'll see if it's something we can do.
I don't know all their sources of funds. They are pursuing grants and they have a budget for the following fiscal year where they're expecting only like $5,000 from the county of Mendocino versus substantially more than that this year is what they're requesting. So they do seem to have a path forward for other funding sources. It could well be state grants from some other source. But anyway, they're pursuing funding that they think could come in yet another year.
If the Clean California, I think, might actually be able to do a startup of something that they can show as a sustainable enterprise. So if Clean California could help in year one, that after that, they were able to sustain it ongoing. Clean California funding is less commonly used for something that's short term. No one thinks that murals will last 100 years, but they're going to last a lot more than a year. So, you know, if it's really startup money, I think there'd be a better chance of getting that approved.
Okay. Should I just forward you the?
Yeah, just forward it on to me.
Okay. All right. Thanks.
Julia, with the free dump days, is there a date set for Willits? And is there going to be one in Laytonville?
We are looking at a date in Willits. Give me a second, I can look it up. I think we do have a tentative date for Willits. I believe we do. I want to say it's July or August. I can look that up in a minute. Laytonville, we're still having trouble. The high school parking lot was not large enough. That was what was recommended to us. So we're having trouble finding a place large enough in Laytonville.
Okay, we'll keep working on that. High school's not large.
Okay.
Any ideas of very large, preferably paved places in Laytonville? We've used old mill sites. That's been a common theme. Mall parking lots. Where else have we gone? We're looking at one to use we used an airstrip one time with the caveat that if there was an air emergency, we had to get out of there really quick. We're looking at a drag strip in one case. So we need a lot of space. The advantage of pavement is that we can run our sweeper truck afterwards to clean up everything. Even if we don't want to leave a mess when people are unloading their trash out of their trucks and trailers, they have a tendency to leave a little debris. And so if it's paved, we can run a sweeper truck afterwards. Leave the place better than when it was when we arrived. So that is we would like to be in Laytonville. We need to find a location.
Okay, well, thanks, Julia. I don't see any other questions or comments. So thanks for the update.
All right. Well, thank you. Reach out to me anytime if you've got ideas or things that you think would help Mendocino. Appreciate your time. Bye.
All right. Well, I think that takes us to item number 12, which is acceptance of the Transit Productivity Committee report of May 12th.
And again, that one's mine. This is Janet again. The Transit Productivity Committee has a couple of other duties besides the ones we talked about under budget, where they identified unmet transit needs and also advised on MTA's annual claim for funds. So this is the other part of what they do. They review and recommend on transit performance and productivity issues. So they'll recommend any revisions to the standards and also do a performance review every year. So you have a copy in your packet of this chart that is the current adopted performance standards, MCOG zone standards. And you've got my written report here about that and also the annual performance review that we just had in May. So as far as the standards, the committee has recommended unanimously to keep the existing standards. You see in my report here the status of the most recent updates. The most recent one was to revise passengers per hour and make that actually a lower number and not as difficult to reach. So that was dialed down a bit last year. And so that's what we used in our review. We think it's premature to change the standards again while there's still an ongoing recovery from COVID conditions. So no changes to the standards are recommended. On the performance review, you also have in the packet here, and also with attached to the minutes, and on consent calendar, you had the committee's minutes, which give you the discussion that was had. There's also 2 pages, a 1-year table and a 3-year table. And so the main observations that came from that review were that costs actually have dropped significantly from 2021, and this was looking at calendar year 2022. And also the big issue really is the ongoing need to build ridership. And this is actually a problem industry-wide. You may have been hearing, throughout the transit, public transit sector, their statewide association has made a proposal for the governor's budget to add more funds. So this is just a problem everywhere. MTA is doing their best to recover ridership, but it does impact these numbers. You'll see that on the 1 year, just as an overview, in 2022, none of the service types that we report here were able to meet that passengers per hour standard. They've done quite well on the operating costs, as I said, bringing those down. And so on the 3-year review, we like to look at that. Sometimes those the standards are able to be met over a 3-year average period. And that's when I do these calculations to, according to our policy, to update the operating cost numbers with the CPI index for inflation, and look at a 3-year average of actual performance and costs with the inflation rate added in. So that's how we keep adjusting annually the operating cost. So actually all of the service types here, which are dial-a-ride, the short distance bus routes, the long distance routes, and the senior centers, were able to meet 2 out of 3 or better. The long distance routes met 3 of 3 standards. And the 4th standard is really just a calculation, cost per passenger. And we go to, excuse me, we go to that one when we, excuse me, I need some water. My apologies there, I had to lubricate a little bit. Yeah, so we go to the 4th standard if 2 of 3 are not met. So that, in a nutshell, is the performance review and the results of that. So in summary, the recommendation was that the Transit Productivity Committee reported good performance while emerging from 2 years of the COVID pandemic. So they're still working on it. And if any of you from the committee have any other comments, you're welcome to chime in. Other than that, we're just asking for you to accept the committee's report of the annual transit performance review through December 31st, 2022.
Are there any questions about the report?
Well, certainly in the news, and when we went to CalCog,
Yeah.
there was certainly talk about, the fiscal cliff that transits were going through, and it's this isn't as bad as it could be,
Right. That's what we thought too. It could have been
So,
worse.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I don't think there is too much help coming from the state as far as some of the fiscal cliffs, by the urban transit centers, but hopefully, they'll pull it through, right?
It's tough all over. There were substantial COVID relief funds for transit. You'll recall in the last couple of years, I think to make a claim on those funds, it has to be pretty specific to, you have to have some evidence that that the need is caused by COVID. So, it's not that easy to claim those funds. I think some of those are left on the table. I think those funds were even discussed under this whole debt ceiling budget talk that Congress was having. So I'm not sure where that ended up, but that was one of the things they were talking about, rescinding, some of the leftover funds. So we have that, those numbers are in our budget in the 4-page table at the bottom of that under information. Those funds don't pass through AMCOG, but we report the balances of those.
Do we have any public comment on this item?
And
Okay.
none online.
Looks like
Anyone
none.
from MTA?
All right. Would
Okay,
someone like
I guess
to
not.
move to accept the transit productivity performance review?
I'll move that we accept the Transit Productivity Committee report.
I will second it.
Okay. Can we have a roll call?
Director John Haschek,
Yes.
Director Mike Carter,
Yes.
Director Greta Connie,
Yes.
Director Jeff Hansen,
Yes.
Director Bernie Norvell,
Yes.
Director Josefina Duenas,
Yes.
and Tasha Alstrand,
Yes.
and Chair Dan Jurdy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to recess as the Policy Advisory Committee, reconvene as the Regional Transportation Planning Agency. Do we have a motion to ratify the actions of the Policy Advisory Committee?
So moved.
I will second.
Okay. Can we have roll call?
Director John Haschek,
Yes.
Director Mike Carter,
Yes.
Director Greta Connie,
Yes.
Director Jeff Hansen,
Yes.
Director Bernie Norvell,
Yes.
Director Josefina Duenas,
Yes.
and Chair Dan Jurdy.
Yes.
Thank you.
Okay, that takes us to reports. Any reports from Caltrans?
Yeah, hi. My camera isn't working today, so I don't know why, but I apologize for that. I just have a couple of quick reports. The project nomination survey closed last week, and we want to thank everyone who provided feedback on that. Our asset management team is working to respond to the inquiries and make modifications to incorporate those comments as feasible. So we'll be doing some additional outreach once there's more project-specific information. The State Route 222 or Talmadge Road Corridor Plan, our system planning team has developed a concept that incorporates most of the community input from the workshop that we had from April. The next steps will include taking it back to the community sometime late this summer. And I had thought that Sherry Rodriguez from our safety team would be here to tell more about the Willits Road Diet project. I don't see her on the call, but we can follow up in a future meeting with that, or if there's any specific questions about that, please reach out. Thank you.
All right, well, thanks. Mendocino Transit Authority.
I have no report.
All right. Great Redwood Trail.
No report.
Okay, all right. MCOG staff, we've got the summary meetings and anything there you want to highlight, or do you want to go on to administrative staff report?
And nothing to highlight. We can go on. So I do have just a verbal update on the Covelo Trail project. At our last meeting, I mentioned that vegetation removal was going to be starting soon. It did start shortly after that meeting. The majority of the vegetation, the above-ground vegetation removal has been complete. There are a few sites that we're waiting on because either they're more sensitive area or the ground is just too wet in those locations. So there are a couple sites that still need vegetation removal, but the majority has been done. As far as actual groundbreaking construction work, we do have to wait until the ground is a little more dry before beginning on that work. So sometime after June 15th, we expect that will be happening. So that's what's happening with the Covelo Trail project. We're moving along and hope to keep moving along. And that's all I have on that.
Okay. A couple other items you have. Did you want to mention anything about the two conferences?
Yeah, so there's the California Transportation Foundation Forum that is coming up this week, actually, that staff will be attending. And then we also have the California Climate and Energy Forum that'll be happening in Santa Rosa. So that ties into the Rural Ren opportunity that MCOG has agreed to be part of. And so we have staff that'll be attending that as well. And that, again, that's next week in Santa Rosa.
All right. Any miscellaneous?
I don't have anything.
Okay. All right. Well, next meeting is August 14th because of 4th of July weekend. And then MCOG planning staff.
Thank you. I have a couple of reports. There are some written reports in your packet. The first one is the feasibility study on MTA's Ukiah Transit Center. Just to let you know where we're at on that. We're continuing to work with a consultant, and MTA has been involved with that project also. Currently, the project team is looking at some scoring and screening criteria for the various potential transit sites. We had started with 6 sites. It looks like one site has already dropped out, and that's the site at the J.C. Penney parking lot. The reason being the owner is unwilling to proceed on discussing selling that site or leasing it. So just to remind you, the other sites we're looking at is one of them is on Mason Street between Norton and Perkins. There are 2 on Perkins Street, if you know what the old Wendy's building that burned down, and then right next to it, the old Savings Bank. And then there's a site on the corner of Brush and Orchard, the southeast corner, and a site on the southwest corner of Orchard and Gobi. So we're working with the consultant team to look at the scoring criteria for those various sites. The consultants are currently contacting property owners to make sure that, there's willingness in us continuing to consider those sites, to make sure there are willing sellers and or long-term lease opportunities. So that's all I have on that. And do you want me to go on to my next report?
Sure, go ahead.
Okay, the next one is MCOG's feasibility study on the mobility solutions for rural communities in Mendocino County. As you all know, in April, the consultant team gave the MCOG board a presentation on looking at some potential recommendations that may come forward. So the team is continuing to vet those possible recommendations. Some of them may not end up coming forward to you, but they're looking at refining those recommendations. I've reported regularly to the MTA board on this project on potential recommendations. The consultant team in the next week or so will be advertising the next community meeting. It's going to be a community-wide virtual meeting of the 5 rural communities that we're looking at. And I believe that date's been selected. I think it's June 27th, but that will be widely advertised. The community meeting, I believe, will be from 5 to 6:30. And then we will be bringing the presentation of the final plan and recommendations to MCOG at the August meeting. Nifili, did you want to add anything on that? Okay. Are there any questions on that? Okay, and then I have a couple of miscellaneous that I don't have written reports on. One of them is that this is not an MCOG-led project, it's an MTA-led project, but MCOG staff is working with MTA on the project team for their short-range transit development plan. And fortunately, the same consultant that is doing the Ukiah Transit Center was also selected to do the short-range transit plan. So there's some good coordination that can happen with those 2 projects. And so we are working on that project team with them. And then the last item, at the last TAC meeting a week or 2 ago, staff brought to the TAC a new, well, it's not real new, it's a year or so old, but it's a new program under the federal infrastructure bill called Safe Streets for All. It has a very large amount of planning and capital funding for local agencies for safety projects. And the call for projects is currently out, due July 10th. In order for an agency to apply for capital money, they have to have a certain plan that would qualify them. And so you all may remember the local road safety plans that we did last year for each agency. Well, MCOG sponsored those plans in order to help the local agencies qualify for the state funding, the Highway Safety Improvement Program funding. So this new federal program, which is a part of the federal infrastructure bill, you have to have a plan, and our local road safety plans almost meet that plan requirement, but there are a few items that are not included in our local plan. So in the TAC meeting a week or two ago, we asked the local agencies if they intend to apply for the capital funding, because there is a way that they could apply for capital funding, and within that application, agree to update their local plan. But the TAC, no local agencies intended to go for that funding. They're not quite ready for it, but they did want MCOG staff to apply for a planning grant, which would bring all of the local agencies' plan up to date. It would kind of be either an addendum, I don't know what we'll call it, but it'll be like updating the plan and enhancing the plan to enable the local agencies to go after this federal funding. And so MCOG staff will be working on that planning grant application. And then next year, when the call for projects comes out, the local agencies will be in a good place if they want to go for that safety funding. And once again, we think it's a great idea because there's a lot of money. It was a $5 billion program over 5 years, and this is the second year. So even if they don't apply in year 2, there are going to be 3 more years. And this is the type of, safety projects can be bike and ped and streets and roads. So it's a good opportunity. So MCOG staff will be working on that planning application. And that's all I have, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, Loretta, could you maybe just give a few more examples of what a safety project might be? So, for example, would a traffic light possibly, or,
Yes.
or traffic roundabout?
Yeah, coordinating traffic lights, intersection improvements, bike and ped improvements. They do look at safety data on, although in the state program, they have to have a benefit cost ratio for the, I'm looking at Nafili, for the Highway Safety Improvement Program, but the federal program, I understand, does not have to have that benefit cost ratio.
Right, so the Highway Safety Improvement Program, or HSIP, that's a program that our local it's been around for a long time. Our local agencies are used to that, and our current local road safety plans were written in response to that particular program. So they're very technical because that is a very technical program based almost entirely on cost-benefit ratio and certain points for certain types of safety concerns with documented accident history. So this one, this is a little more flexible. It doesn't have the same, the Safe Roads for All doesn't have the same cost-benefit ratio requirements as the HSIP program. So it does open it up to a few more things than would be eligible for funding or competitive under the HSIP program.
Is AMCOG staff aware of, any locations in Mendocino County where there have been a history of accidents that, would make them like plausible candidates?
Well, any of the projects that are in the current load road safety plan are candidates, but I don't know those offhand. I could look them up real quick.
Yeah, off the top of my head, I can name North State Street was one of the big unincorporated locations. North State Street, Sherwood Road. I believe there was, and it was all, didn't include state highways, so I believe there was maybe Branscombe Road also. There were several, but those are the ones that are coming to me off the top of my head. I don't remember for the cities which locations, but those are all identified with the cost-benefit ratio in our current local road safety plan. However, because of the local road safety plan, all but Point Arena, and Point Arena just didn't put forward an application, all of our local agencies received HSIP grants. So several of the projects that were identified in those local road safety plans are being or will be implemented through those grants that were just awarded recently.
And for clarification, did you say that these particular funds are only where it's interconnected with a state highway, or it doesn't have to be connected with a state highway?
This program does not have to be connected.
Okay. All right, well, thanks for all the updates, Loretta. I think that brings us to nearly the end of the agenda. So, MCOG directors, anybody have a report? Okay.
Yeah, I'll say that I'm planning on going to the Climate and Energy Forum in Santa Rosa next week, so I'll see whoever is there, and I'm looking forward to it. And then also I'll wait on my CalCog.
I think you can go ahead with the CalCog.
Okay, I'll go. So CalCog's having a lobby day tomorrow in Sacramento, but I've got a board meeting, so I won't be there. I should have told Director Norvell about that.
You did at the last meeting, and I will be there.
Oh, okay, great.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, well, it looks like then we're ready to adjourn at 3:05.
Yep, thanks, everyone.
Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.